headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
I woke up this morning, truly, I'm a happy warrior. My wife says, how are you always so happy? I woke up really depressed. I went to bed, posted some stuff about the Mariupol bombing of that maternity hospital. And I got literally hundreds of responses, and some of them are bots, but I know some are real people, like Richard, who's saying, that never happened. Zelensky's a puppet, and Putin is fighting the World Economic Forum, and he's a good guy. And it got me depressed that I have fellow citizens in America who believe this garbage.
Yeah. I mean, much of it, of course, is being put out by Russia, which is what they do, you know?
But not only, but the fact that anybody who's over the age of 18 with, over a double-digit IQ can say Putin is the good guy. This is an individual. Can we be clear here? Just two things end the conversation. He's a former KGB colonel.
Yeah.
KGB colonels didn't fight for the West, didn't fight for Christianity. They persecuted and tortured Christians, number one. And secondly, this is a guy who rose to power how? This isn't in dispute, please. Okay, everybody out there with a tinfoil hat on, this is not in dispute. There was a series of bombings in Moscow where innocent people were killed. An apartment block was blown up, and that's how he became president. And that bombing wasn't done by Chechens. We found out later it was done by his secret service. He killed Russians in Moscow to become the head of the Russian state, and he's been there for 23 years. Can we have a bit of sanity in the world, please?
Yes, exactly right. Let us, before we go any further, listen to a video that was referred to earlier by one of my earlier callers, Sebastian. I think you've seen this before. It's Senator Rubio in Washington, D.C. at a hearing talking to Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland. A couple of people have made reference to this. Let's see what she actually says.
Well, I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
So, Sebastian Gorka, what did you make of that exchange for a start?
I actually opened my show yesterday, my radio show, with a monologue on this issue, and I discussed the facts of bioweapons research and had on the show a woman called Natalie Winters, who's written the best article on the piece in America in the last 48 hours. It's at the National Pulse. So just a little bit of background. In 1972, 109 nations signed something called the Bioweapons and Toxins Treaty, which banned the use of biological weapons in war, made it internationally illegal. However, it stipulated every nation has the right to research bioweapons to create defenses against them, including the UK, including America. Now, apparently, there are bioweapons research labs, not productions facilities, in the Ukraine. And weirdly, in 2005, a senator called Barack Obama was involved in helping fund them. Okay, you can look this up. It's the Non-Lugar Act. Senator Obama was part of it. I think it's weird. It's crazy to have support for research facilities so close to Russia, but it is not illegal. And the idea that somehow we were plotting, or the World Economic Forum or Klaus Schwab was plotting a bioweapons attack against Russia, you really have to be on some funny pills to believe that.
Right. Well, also, you know that it's being messed about with when you hear the Russians and you Sergei Lavrov this morning basically saying, oh, yeah, that's why we went into Ukraine to shut down these biolabs. Well, hang on a minute. 2 weeks ago, you said you were going in to stop the Nazis, didn't you?
Right, to save the ethnic Russians in a maneuver. Classic, classic, classic. And of course, why are you bombing a maternity hospital if the threat is bioweapons lab? Will you indulge me for a second, Mike?
Sure.
So there's a guy I'm sure you know called Brendan O'Neill.
Yes.
And somebody on my locals account posted a little segment of writing from Brendan. I'm just going to read 2 sentences because it perfectly sums up the challenge you face and I face. The COVID pandemic has completely fried some people's brains. These new conspiracy theorists have convinced themselves they are brave, independent thinkers, when in truth, they don't think at all. It is a life-zapping way to think. And I have to praise you, Talk Radio, because we have to have common sense and sanity. Invading another country, if you're a former KGB colonel who's bombed apartment blocks in his own city, is never a good thing. I don't care what the global reset says. I don't care what Klaus Schwab or George Soros said, who by himself is evil. It is never okay to bomb hospitals. And the idea that this is all crisis actors and this is theater, I'm depressed if you believe that.
Yes. I mean, the people that are sort of not exactly defending the likes of Richard and Ken, but are kind of understanding it, say that the fact is the government have lied to people for a very long time. And that is true. And part of our sort of need to be as Talk Radio and what we did for the last 2 years was to question the narrative and to question what the government did. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean, therefore, that everything is untrue and that everything is not actually real, because there was COVID, you know, there was a reason why the governments of the world behaved in the way that they did. We, like you, Sebastian, because you were one of the voices of dissent, believed that lots of what the governments did were wrong. But it doesn't mean that the thing didn't exist and the thing wasn't invented so that they could do the things that they did. Do you know what I mean?
Totally, totally. You should be skeptical. You should be cynical, but you should apply critical thinking. You shouldn't always default to everything's a lie. It's like Zelensky is an actor. This is a man who has stayed in his country. When we, sadly, the Biden White House said, we're going to send a plane and evacuate you, what did he say? I don't need a ride. I need ammunition.
Yeah.
That's fact. He's not in some hollowed out volcano, you know, petting a white cat, plotting everything with a green screen. He's actually there in Kiev fighting Russians. And I'm sorry, maybe my history, my parents surviving communist dictatorship, I am very happy and supportive of anybody who is killing Russians that invaded their country. If you don't have moral clarity on that, you don't have moral clarity at all.
You're exactly right. Now, talking of moral clarity, what the hell is Joe Biden doing? Because he doesn't seem to be doing very much.
So I was in studio last Friday. So we go live at 3 p.m. and we're prepping for the show, you know, DC time. My producer says, oh, it's just been confirmed by the wire services. Biden has left for the 8th weekend in a row to Delaware to hang. You know, there is a war in Europe and he's going to Delaware to hang out and, you know, stare out the window for hours. The contact Secret Service told me, go there and stare out the window. This is shocking. And when we see the fact it took him 2 weeks to stop purchasing oil from Russia, 2 weeks. Thanks to him, Russia became the 4th highest importer of oil to this country. We were funding him for weeks after his invasion, despite the fact that when we were in the White House, when fracking was unleashed, when we had the XL Keystone pipeline about to come online with Canada, we were energy independent, Mike. We were selling energy to other people. We weren't having to buy it. And now, how about, could you imagine, Mike, if you're the prime minister and people don't return your call? He tried to put a call in 2 days ago to the King of Saudi Arabia, to the UAE, to grovel, to put lower prices on the cartel oil from OPEC. Neither the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia nor the UAE returned Joe Biden's calls. He is the president of the United States, and now he's sending diplomats to Venezuela, who are big buddies of Russia, to grovel to buy oil from Venezuela. It's little bit different from when we were in the White House.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, Donald Trump got it right, didn't he, when he said that Germany was way too dependent on Russian oil and that would lead to a bad place, which indeed it did. He more or less called Germany an outpost of the Russian Empire, which it kind of is. And they're now in a terrible place because they can't cut their dependency off too soon because they won't be able to heat their houses and have their lights on. Meanwhile, of course, the UAE have said we'll just increase production and then we can lower the price of oil anyway and screw Russia that way.
We've used every day this week, we've used the same clip from 2018 with President Trump at the United Nations warning Europe and warning Germany not to depend on Russian gas and oil. And the camera pans to the German delegation who are tittering, who are laughing at President Trump's warning 4 years ago. I don't think they're laughing right now, Mike.
I really don't think they are. And also the other thing about Biden not being able to get a phone call through to other leaders of the world is that Boris Johnson, who took a big shellacking from me over his treatment of COVID and over the ludicrous nature of all these ridiculous parties he was having, has actually stepped up to the plate in the last month and has actually become pretty statesmanlike. And more leaders are now talking to him than they are talking to Biden.
Yeah, it's the saving grace of this administration in the UK. I had high hopes of Boris when he caught COVID. He kind of lost the plot, kind of lost his spine. I don't know whether it was a near-death experience or something, but in the last 3 weeks, man, has he pulled his act together. There's one outside of Ukraine and outside of Zelensky, there's one guy who's showing the way for us. And even I think I said this the day after the invasion, that speech Boris gave and immediately backed up by Keir Starmer. I'm a conservative, thank you very much. But when both the Conservatives and Labour say, yes, this is wrong and Britain is going to do everything to support the freedom fighters, a full round of applause.
Yeah.
Full round.
And what have you made, Sebastian, of the Americans' reaction, or Biden's reaction to Poland? Poland said that they would give their planes to the US could give them to the Ukrainians, and everyone would be happy, paint them with Ukrainian colours, away you go. He said no. And I don't understand why he used the word untenable. What does he mean, untenable? How is it untenable to give your ally military hardware to fight off the invaders?
It's an embarrassment. When somebody in NATO says we're going to step up, we're not going to fight for Ukraine, but we're going to give them the capacity to fight themselves. They say we're going to give away our MiG jets if the US backfills it, and they say, yeah, okay. But when it gets serious to the point they deploy them to Ramstein to get them shipped to Ukraine, and then the Pentagon backs out in the most powerful nation in the world, I summed it up thusly. I put a post on Instagram that made a lot of the conspiracy theorists go crazy. I said, there's a photograph yesterday of our defense secretary, a former 4-star general, receiving the Finnish defense minister outside the Pentagon. Both of them have the COVID nappies on their faces. And then I had a photograph of Zelensky in his, OG green T-shirt from the giving a press conference, no mask. And I said, this guy is our defense secretary. Let's have some real leadership from people like Zelensky. It is an embarrassment. We used to be the most powerful nation in the world. Now we look weak. People like Zelensky are strong.
It takes you back, does it not, to that day famously when Donald Trump came out without a mask on, got into his limo, and the bedwetters all said, oh, but he's putting the Secret Service detail in danger. It's like, that's okay. They're in danger every day in case somebody shoots him.
They are trained. For those who don't know what the Secret Service does, we call them the bullet catchers because they are trained to jump in front of the assassin's bullet. So I think they can handle COVID. Thank you very much. And that moment afterwards, when he came up to the balcony on the White House, I've used it as a meme millions of times, where he stood there and took off his mask. We got to have him back in the White House, Mike. 2024, roll on.
Well, listen, there's no chance that Biden's going to still be there by that stage. He'll have disappeared off and buried himself like the groundhog in that town in Pennsylvania, no doubt, and try and see if he can come out again. But what about Kamala Harris? I mean, I must say I shuddered slightly when I saw her going up the steps of an aircraft with a black umbrella, thinking, where the hell does she think she's going?
Did you see she gave an interview to a podcast for this is for Black Americans, so it should be a serious discussion to a very big voting bloc, and she said the following, and I've used the audio, you've got to grab it, Mike. Ukraine is a country in Europe. It is next to Russia. Russia is a big country, and Russia invaded Ukraine, and that's wrong. I mean, literally like talking to 5-year-olds, preschool, and that was her geopolitical analysis of war in Europe today. And she is a heartbeat away from the presidency, Mike.
Literally, or maybe even a skipped heartbeat away.
We just call her the cackler, and that, you know, the good news is she's a disaster, which means in 2024, if she's the opponent, the president is going to shellac her. This is the woman who, in the Democrat primaries, a little bit of a reminder, got less than 2% of the vote from Democrats, okay? She's there for two reasons, to do with her skin pigmentation and her gender, which, if I were her, I'd be pretty insulted, wouldn't you?
I would, absolutely right. I mean, I take great pride in the fact that I can't get those kind of jobs because of my gender and my skin pigmentation and my great age, because I'm now considered to be white, middle-class, middle-aged and, you know, absolutely abhorrent.
You are a member of the patriarchy, Mike. Don't forget the term. You are a member of the oppressive patriarchy.
Exactly right. Listen, terrific to talk to you as ever, Sebastian. Catch Sebastian on America First. It's a radio show. It's a podcast. It's the Gorka Reality Check as well. Lots going on here.
Good talk. Hot talk.
Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk radio.